The next show will start in 1 minute.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/TV Free Baltimore.
How are you doing, Delegate Erica?
I'm doing good. Glad to be here again.
Great. And I want to get started with a bad bill, and I want to use this bill in a conversation about teaching our viewers on how to be most effective when contacting your elected official and the realities of how the machinery of government works and how that affects your ability to contact your elected official and having things done that you want done, whether you agree or disagree with the bill. So the bill I want to bring up is a new car tax for Marylanders, a bad bill alert. This came across my Facebook feed, and it says, bad bill alert, Senate Bill 566 would require all Maryland vehicle owners to undergo the inconvenience and cost of a vehicle inspection by an auto repair shop every 2 years. For any car older than 5 years, that's most cars, vehicle owners would have to pay an auto repair shop $45 to make all the repairs identified by the auto shop. And it goes on, and anybody that wants to read the rest of that can go to the TV Free Baltimore Facebook page and read through that. So, my question to you is, let me get rid of this. Okay, we need to explain to our viewers how this bill, so it's a Senate bill, so this is a good example, Senate Bill 566. So let's say that I lived in your district, I was your constituent, and I saw this and I disagreed with it. So I said to myself, I'm going to write my delegate Erica, and say I'd oppose this bill. And I think that most people, unfortunately, have the thought that all elected officials read all the legislation in Annapolis and that they can somehow vote on every piece, and that's not the case at all. What happens is a bill is introduced and then it's assigned to a committee, and that the elected officials in Annapolis are assigned to committees, and the work on the bills are done in that committee.
Yep.
So in this case, okay, this is a Senate bill. You're in the House of Delegates. So if I wrote you a letter saying, hey, I don't like this bill, well, the fact of the matter is you, as my elected delegate, don't have a chance to vote for or against it until it came into the House of Delegates, into the full chamber.
Yes.
Unless it came from the Senate and went to your committee, which it probably wouldn't.
This one won't, no.
So it's very important for a constituent to understand that your elected representative can only vote for or against certain things that are either in their committee or come into the full chamber after it comes out of committee.
Yep, that's exactly how it works.
And there's a little caveat, okay? And I wrote this down, but as a matter of professional decorum, delegates respect the work that the other delegates do in their respective committees. So if something comes out of a committee voted favorably, and that's the only way it can come out of committee, into the full chamber, for the most part, and in most cases, will just rubber stamp the things that are coming out of the committee.
Yeah,
Unless it's some sort of controversial bill, and then there will be lots of debate within the whole chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things get heated up, and there can be additional work than what the committee itself has done.
Oh yeah, we've in my own committee already moved bills out of it. I think 3 so far this year hit the full chamber, and were sent back to our committee for more work. So that was
okay. So explain that to our viewers here.
So one of the examples was HB4. It was the long gun transfer bill, and that was Delegate Atterbury's bill. She's the vice chair of judiciary, the same committee I sit on, and it was the goal of it was to force anyone who was privately selling or temporarily transferring a long gun, so rifles and shotguns, to anyone to have to undergo a background check through the NICS system. So that was her bill. And she brought it down to the floor, and on the floor during debate, it was a very heated debate, a ton of problems with the bill, which I had personally tried to sit down with her to work on these problems in advance. And she was, having none of it. And then on the floor, a lot of the issues came out, and they ended up having to send it back to judiciary. And we all got called in to work on it again. Well, not the whole committee, but some of us specifically got called in who had already drafted amendments that would fix a lot of the problems that we saw with it. So that was, kind of embarrassing for our whole committee, particularly embarrassing for the sponsor, to have to change her bill after it hit the floor. But she did work on it with us after that, and it moved out with slightly less problems. So it can happen like that. The speaker can just send it back, or what happened was the chairman Klippinger, asked for the bill to go back to our committee.
Okay, so let's say that I was a constituent of yours and was against the bill and wanted to write you, call you, or email you. How effective would that communication be in this case?
So for people that were emailing me about HB4, for example, all of those emails go to my my main email account, which is run by my staff. So my staff reads all the emails, and then if there's an unusual bill or something that's going to go to my committee that's very important, or where they're not sure what my position is, then they forward that to my private email, and I can read it from my phone. So that's very helpful. For the bills where they already know my position, sanctuary, state legislation, gun legislation, they'll go ahead and write you back and let you know, I'm not voting for this. She's not going to vote for that no matter what. So, but thank you for reaching out, and we'll keep you posted if anything changes. So I think it is effective to email people. Calling is even more effective, in my opinion, particularly if you know a lot about an issue and it's a complicated bill. Giving a call to the office and explaining what your concerns are, that's very helpful. I mean, I've gotten several great tips from constituents who have read bills and realized there was serious language issues, and that, they were very confusing. And so it does help to have, essentially watchdogs helping you find the bad stuff. It's very helpful.
Okay, let's go back to Senate Bill, what was it, 566. It's a Senate bill. You're in the House of Delegates, so you cannot vote one way or the other on it, regardless of how you feel, regardless of how the constituent contacting you would feel. So let's carry the conversation over to the Senate. Let's see, you say, okay, these are the people that are on the committee in the Senate. How effective is it for people that aren't constituents of those committee members to contact them?
I think it's still effective. So when I lobbied before I became elected, I focused on parental rights. And so when there was a bill that I saw I didn't like, the whole community of us would get together and we would focus on all of the members of the two committees that were going to hear the bill. And we would do a comprehensive campaign that included first emailing, calling every single member and letting them know that you didn't like the bill, or if it was a sponsor, ask them to withdraw the bill. And then we would go down in person. We would go down in person. Usually we would have literature. A one pager is the best, something simple with graphics and color. That's helpful too. If you can pick an unusual size, that helps because it sort of stands out. So yeah, that was sort of a three-pronged approach, and it was wildly effective. We succeeded in killing almost every bill that we ever went up against. So, and it wasn't a lot of us, maybe
Right.
30 people. So
Right.
you can definitely stop bills.
Okay, so you believe that it is effective for people to get involved, call, write, email, go down, meet with the delegates, even if you're not a constituent, even if they're, let's say, in the Senate, and they've got this bill that you disagree with or agree with. So you would say that it's definitely effective to get involved no matter what the situation.
Absolutely. I would. I mean, if I really was worried about a bill,
Hmm.
there's nothing that would stop me from letting the people know that had decision-making power that I didn't like it.
Okay. Okay. Now, let's talk about how the game can be changed somewhat from just your average Joe citizen that just wants his opinion heard and to those that actually um, donate money to politicians. I imagine it changes the whole game because, for example, Senate bill that we're talking about, this new car tax, having your car inspected, and all this sort of stuff. It would be one thing for me to contact the senators that are in the committee, even if I'm not their constituent or am their constituent. But if I'm actually actively donating money to their campaign or their opponent's campaign, I'm sure that completely changes the game. So, can you touch on that?
Let me tell you a story about last session. Last session in the judiciary, we had a bill that was going to allow one particular law firm to, um, I don't know how to put it politely, make out with bank. Um, None of us liked the bill, but there was an incredible amount of pressure coming from the top down. And that pressure, we later found out, may have been tied to about $200,000 in donations to the majority caucus in both the House and the Senate. So the bill ended up dying, but it was not, it was because they gave up because we lost our speaker, I believe. And if he had been healthy, I think it would have probably gone differently. So money has a huge impact, sadly, in legislation in the state of Maryland.
Okay, and what would you recommend to the average Joe that's out there as far as having your voice, shall we say, amplified with donations? Should you join a PAC? Should you send $10 to your incumbents? I mean, what's the best strategy to have to amplify your voice, we'll say?
Yeah, so when I was lobbying before I was elected, I would tell all of our members that they should just go to their representatives' fundraisers. That they first of all they really don't see a lot of new faces. It's usually the same faces that are involved in politics in a given area. So just to have somebody new show up and come with money and say, like, I believe in you, here's my money, it means a lot to people. I mean, you really feel like they're behind you and that they care about you. So I would always encourage people, go to your local representatives, try to go to your council districts, try to go to, if you have one, two, or three delegates that represent you, try to go to their fundraisers and just build a relationship with them, because politics is all about relationships. And so if you get an opportunity to meet them on their own turf, and when they're used to not seeing new people, you'll have a really big impact, and you'll definitely have their ear, and they'll remember you. I mean, if I would donate to a campaign, like I walked in a parade for Kathy Shaleka before I was elected, and she remembered me. I was this pregnant woman that came to meet her, and then I had a newborn baby, and I walked in a parade with her, and she never forgot me. So so it does have an impact, and meeting them on their own turf and supporting them financially. I always think that it's a good idea. I mean, I had a bunch of people that were new, that had never donated to any campaign before, that donated to my campaign before this session, and I can still remember them and see exactly where they were sitting out of this room of whole people, because it's special when you see somebody come out that you've never seen before and that says, "Hey, I've never been involved in this kind of stuff before, but I really like you and I want to support you." It means something. It does.
Okay, so building relationships, that's what's important, showing financial support and going down and meeting people face to face. That's the best strategy, you'd say.
I think so. I think face to face is always best, unless you don't communicate well face to face. I mean, everybody has their own skill set. So if you do struggle with interpersonal communication skills, then phone calls and emails may be better for you. But I always love it when people just stop by my office and like, "Hey, I didn't have an appointment, but I have this bill and I'm down here and I'm trying to get people to think about it, in a different way." And my staff will read it. And if they think it's a bill that I'm going to actually have access to, if it's coming to my committee, or if they think there's a good chance it'll move through the committee that it's in and hit the floor, then they bring it to me. And if I'm in my office and nobody else is there, I'll usually take the meeting. I'll usually say, "Do you want to come in and talk to me?" So yeah, it works.
Right. Another thing that came across my desk as far as citizen participation, I'm hearing that there's so many bills down in Annapolis right now that when committees are hearing the bills, they're actually restricting the time that people can make statements on these bills as little as 1 minute. Is there a lot of that going on down there?
It is just unbelievable how many bills we have right now. It's so unnecessary. I mean, I think something has to be done about it personally. In the Judiciary Committee in the House, not only are we restricting citizens, but we're restricting sponsors to the same limit. So we had yesterday, I presented a bill and I was limited to 2 minutes. And when the 2 minutes was up, I was like, "Is that all the time? Is that 2 minutes? That's all I got?" I mean, we used to allow sponsors to speak unlimited, and now we're restricting sponsors to 2 minutes. So yeah, it's getting tough down there, and we had to add another day. Usually we don't have hearings on Mondays or Fridays. We have public hearings on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But we've been having to have public hearings on Fridays. We didn't have any today, but we did have a voting session today. And other committees, they had public hearings today, and they're having public hearings on Monday. On Mondays, we don't even have session till 8 p.m. So it's definitely pretty bad down there. And I feel like something has to be done. There's a lot of duplicative bills. Everybody puts in, these pet project bills that are never going to move, and they know they're not going to move. And so it is kind of tiring for us to keep hearing the same bills year after year that they're never going to go anywhere. It's virtue signaling. It's for that particular representative to, brag to their community that they put in this bill that's never going to go anywhere. So,
Okay, here we go again. What is the leadership down in Annapolis doing about that? I would think that the new people running both the state Senate and the House of Delegates would sit down and say, "Look, we have to cut a lot of this stuff out so people can come to committee and have more than 2 minutes or 1 minute or whatever they're being restricted to." I mean, is there leadership down there that sees the problem and is trying to do something about it?
not to my knowledge. It doesn't seem like there's anything coming from leadership now. Republicans don't get a lot of updates from the Democrat leadership, which is who would have control over an issue like this. I mean, I know in our caucus we have offline discussed a couple of different ideas, like limiting delegates to 5 bills, and if they want to submit more than 5 bills, they would need to get a certain percentage of bipartisan support on any bills over 5. That could be something, but I haven't heard any ideas coming from the top down. That's all things that we've been mulling over in our own minds to try and make it more effective. Because you're right, people come in and they wait all day, and then they are told they can speak for 90 seconds. And sometimes in the judiciary, we will combine bill hearings. And so you will speak for 90 seconds and you might be speaking on 2 or 3 bills in 90 seconds, which
That
is really,
that's
really, really difficult.
that just sounds like insanity to me. I cannot
I
believe
know.
that the leadership wouldn't see this as a problem and try to straighten it out and restrict the number of bills that people can put in.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that idea. It would actually end up hurting the minority party, unfortunately, because a lot of the bills that never pass are our bills. Um, but also, we were there till 10 o'clock the other night, because, 2 people put in really bad gun bills. And it was crazy. And there's no reason for just really bad bills that have been around for 3 or 4 seasons to come back again. And then we have to drag all the advocates out, and the Republicans have to attack the bill because it's terrible and doesn't make any logical sense. So yeah, I wish that there was some change that would come from top down sometimes, but so far, nothing.
Yeah, and again, the General Assembly is dominated by the Democrats, and as I've said on this show several times, I'm not a Republican, but I see leadership coming from the minority party, and the majority party is just not showing leadership yet again in this situation. So how about we actually move on to some bills? Does that sound good?
Great.
Okay, I've got some queued up here, and this once again comes from the Maryland Taxpayers Association. And let's see what they're talking about. Okay, the sales tax, House Bill 1628, which is in Ways and Means. The bill would raise sales tax fees by $2.6 billion, and this is getting actually a lot of airtime, even in the mainstream media. What's going down in Annapolis concerning this sales tax hike?
I mean, people are starting to pack their luggage. I kid, but seriously, I mean, what planet are we living on? There are Democrats that are disappointed in this bill big time. I mean, they can't come out and say it because they live, in the People's Republic of Maryland. They're not allowed to say what they want. But yeah, there are Democrats even that are very disappointed. In fact, I've heard that Senate President Ferguson talk a little bit about the issue, and sort of reference it, but I haven't heard him give a glowing recommendation for that. So this may be a pet project that comes from the more liberal House side, and then it gets squashed on the Senate side. That's certainly what I'm hoping. But yeah, I mean, it's just such a dumb idea.
Yeah, it is.
They're just trying to make people run out of the state. It's got to be their goal.
Yeah.
Just get people to leave.
But yet again, it's the Republicans that's showing leadership. Hogan goes out and gets a haircut. I'm sure you've seen the picture. Everybody has. It says, I'm doing this before they raise taxes on haircuts. I mean, that's leadership.
Yep. My husband showed me the photo. He's like, oh, look, he gets his hair done the same place I do.
Yeah. I mean, despite which side of the question you're on, he's showing leadership in a very creative way.
Yeah. He's creative. He's funny. He tries to engage people. I mean, people respond to him. Voters respond to him. Even non-voters, even just regular people who don't care about politics respond well to him because he's down to earth.
Yeah, he's I think he's doing a great job. Let's go back to these bills and see what else they're talking about. The Maryland Taxpayers Association, House Bill 1494 and Senate Bill 1040. Yep. Increases county income taxes, if done on a bracket basis, to 3.5 progressively, which is in Ways and Means. It appears that such counties with a much lower tax rate would raise their tax to at least 3.05% after December 31st, 2021. And now this goes back to something that we've been talking about, that 3.2% income tax rate in Baltimore County is the highest by law at the state level. And just last show I asked you, are people in Annapolis going to raise that ceiling up above 3.2%?
The answer is yes.
And here we go.
Crazy. And it almost sounds like the way that overview is that they would be forcing counties to to increase their county taxes. Well, it's almost like a mandate on the counties.
Yeah, well, again, this goes back to what we were talking about last week. How is Baltimore County going to pay for Kirwan?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if they
Excellent,
can
excellent
raise,
question.
yeah, if they can raise the income tax rate from 3.2% up to 3.5%, well, there's one of the ways.
Yeah, that's certainly going to help. I don't think that that would be enough to cover all of it. I mean, how much do they need to? I think they need to bring at least 300 million or something
Well,
like
that's
that
the
forward.
city. Baltimore County, I think, is
Oh, you're right.
88.5,
You're
but it's the
right.
city.
Yep.
And like we showed on the last show, we had Sheila Dixon in the studio, and she said that's something we can't do. The
Yeah,
city cannot
she's
raise
right.
taxes. So, um,
Yeah.
now for me, that's a Democrat showing leadership. She's saying no. And my question
At
to you
least
is,
she's honest, right?
yeah, well, she is. She's like, we cannot cut services and we can't raise taxes, and they can't.
Yeah,
She
I
gets
know.
it.
Yeah.
She's showing leadership.
And look
Um,
what they're already paying for water, just for water down there. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah. It's crazy. But is anybody in
baffling.
Annapolis, back in the chambers, is anybody saying, maybe we need to just send Kirwan back to the drawing board because this isn't going to work?
No.
No,
Nope.
nobody's there yet.
I mean, Republicans are saying it every 5 minutes, but no, they're full steam ahead with they're full steam ahead with this. This is a huge leadership priority for both the Senate president and for the Speaker of the House. So, yeah, no, I'm not hearing any rumors that they're going to be doing anything different than what they're doing now, which is moving full steam ahead, whether they have money or not.
They're they're gonna, man, are they going to wreak havoc in our economy? So let's get back to the what else they're talking about here. And we've got, where's my cursor? Hold on. Okay, there we go. SB 1028, balance the state budget, constitutional amendment.
Oh my Lord.
Allows General Assembly to increase spending. Oh my God. Now, does that mean that at this point only the governor can increase spending?
That's correct. Only the governor can increase spending right now.
Oh
It's
my God.
constitutionally mandated. That's the scariest one you've mentioned, and I can't believe I haven't had anybody contact me about it yet. That's
Wait, wait,
terrifying.
wait, 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 wait. Let me get this. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying here. Are you saying that you're actually learning stuff from TV Free
Yeah,
Baltimore?
I love TV3.
Okay, well,
I
there.
can't believe no one has well, I guess because it's a Senate bill and mostly people contact me about House issues. But
Oh,
yeah, that's terrifying. Right now, the governor gets to decide how big the pie is, and the General Assembly gets to sort of move the pieces around inside the pie and then send it back, and then the governor decides what to disperse. So the
hmm.
governor in Maryland has, I mean, some of the best control over budgeting of any governor in the nation. And what that looks like to me is that the General Assembly is completely usurping the power of the governor um, by constitutional changes. That is a very heavy lift.
Yeah, let me finish reading this because it um, sheds a lot of light on this. It says today, the legislators cannot increase spending. What they do is pass mandates that the governor must spend in following years. The mandates go all the way back to at least 1918 and take up at least 85% of the budget. Maryland is the only state that operates this way. Well, surprise, surprise. Perhaps a study should be made reviewing best methods of all the states. I would definitely support that. It seems spending has increased in all states, but it seems out of control in Maryland. I would agree with that. This
Mhm.
is the wrong bill. It should be about a study. And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really trust studies. They on issues like this, they just pick their own. They stack the deck with their own economists. I don't know where they're getting their information from. It's the most convoluted stuff you've ever seen. But if they turn that into a study, it's certainly better than having a constitutional change. If they make a change like that, though, it would have to go on the ballot. I mean, I don't think you could get away with making a constitutional change without a ballot initiative. So the people would end up having the final say on that. And I mean, they would probably spend hundreds of millions of, well, at least several $1 million, I would assume, trying to advertise their side of the story and try and get people to vote for it. Um, that's horrifying, though.
It is horrifying, and unfortunately, I think it could pass if it was presented to the general population of Maryland, because I'm not quite sure people would really understand what's going on.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah. Look at the casino lockbox.
yeah,
I mean, it took us three years or so for the public to understand that they had been duped.
yeah. And there was a recent poll that I think it was Goucher. Well, it may not be Goucher poll, but there's a recent poll that said like 69 or 70% of the Marylanders really didn't know what Kirwan was, or really quite didn't hear about it. And
Right.
I
Right. Well,
mean,
that's changing with the tax stuff
yeah, I
because
mean,
their
taxpayers
ears
are,
perk up. Their
yeah,
ears are like taxes, more taxes. We already
yeah,
pay some of the highest taxes in the entire country. What do we need taxes for? And then when they explain that they want to, 80, I think 80% of the Kirwan costs are associated with teacher pay alone, and most of it's not merit based. It's mandating that teachers, go and get higher education degrees, and then offering money to them for doing that, regardless of the quality or the outcomes or the performance. So people are listening. They're starting to listen, but it's hard.
Well, I do want to mention I'm not a big believer in polls whatsoever. I took a couple of statistics classes when I was in college, and we were taught how you can manipulate results on surveys by posing questions a particular way. But I just want to mention this one Goucher College poll, okay? And they asked the question, is Maryland moving in the right direction? Now, it came back with a 49% approval, but last year was at 59%, so that's a 10% drop. Now, do you think that that 10% drop is because of Kirwan and these tax hikes?
Yeah, it's the taxes. I mean, it's absolutely the tax. It has to be. That's what I would say. When was the poll done?
Uh, just last week.
Yeah, it's tax. I guarantee it. The
Yeah,
news waves. I mean, both parties are sick to death of being taxed, the actual people. Um, and the parties in the legislature, the Democrats just their appetite for more money is never going to end, it seems like. And the people are fed up. I mean, I, I hope that they keep pushing this messaging because I really think that it's going to be a landslide for the Republicans in the next cycle. Because we're not the party of tax and spend, unless we're talking about Congress.
well, I mean, look, taxing people. Once again, I'm going to say it. I'm a libertarian. Libertarians are not anarchists. We believe in government, and
Right,
government has certain duties it has to perform. Just basically talking, it's the government's job to fill the potholes. It's the government's
right,
job to put the bad guys in jail. Okay? So you have to have taxes, and they have to be spent for those essential services that only the government can provide. Only the government can arrest, prosecute, and incarcerate criminals. Okay?
right.
That's an essential job that has to be done. We have to pay taxes to get that done. But beyond that, what should the government be doing? And this leads me to my next thing that I have queued up, and I want to get your opinion on this. Okay. Uh, down in the down in Annapolis, they're talking about a plan to renovate Pimlico and Laurel racetracks. And they're also talking about, and I don't know if I have that queued up, money for the BSO.
Yeah.
No, that's decorum. But is it this one? Damn, I hit it. But anyway, why why are we as taxpayers paying for Pimlico and Laurel racetracks to be renovated, and also to give, I think, third of the budget to the BSO?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Last year, the BSO came down and they asked for money to keep the lights on, and I think most of us gave them some money. I don't think it was very much, but they failed to tell us that every time they open their doors, they lose money. So it was just we a lot of us felt kind of manipulated, and if they're coming back again this year asking for money, they're going to have a huge problem on their hands, because it's not a sustainable model. And as much as some people do enjoy classical music and hearing it live, we can have a traveling orchestra come through our city, and it would save us a lot of money. So I think that's going to be a non-starter, at least for the Republicans. I don't know about the Democrats. I haven't heard talk about it, but on the racetrack issue, yeah, this is quite a situation. I'm not sold. I'm not sold on the plan. My friends that live in Pimlico don't want the racetrack there. So there's been a lot of messaging about how this is about helping a community. This is about how we can, build up this community over there. Yeah, the Orthodox Jewish community over there, most of those people do not want the Pimlico racetrack in their backyard. They're tired of it. They're ready to move on. So um, I don't know what will happen with it. It's certainly one of the most heavily lobbied issues, um, but it doesn't seem like a great fiscal investment, at least from a state perspective. I mean, what we've offered them essentially, or what the Appropriations Committee has offered them, is a bond. I think a 30-year bond. Um, the jury's still out on what will happen with that bill, in my opinion. But nobody's come to me specifically to whip me or to lobby me on it. So we'll see.
Okay, well, let me do some live lobbying right now. Okay, like I said, government has essential duties that it has to perform, and we should pay taxes for those. But in my opinion, the government should not be supporting private businesses, and this goes into the question like, should Maryland taxpayers foot the bill for new stadiums?
Right.
I mean, should we be given? Well, I remember the days when Jack Kent Cooke was trying to build a stadium for the Redskins. Should Maryland taxpayers, in part or in full, subsidize that?
Right.
I did an interview with somebody that's doing a documentary about the Baltimore Colts and tying it into the Ravens, and even he said that eventually Raven Stadium is going to age to the point to where the question is going to come up again: should Maryland taxpayers build yet another stadium for the Ravens to make sure that they stay here? We have the whole history of the Colts leaving. And this is a question that is asked all the time. What is legitimate use of tax dollars? And me personally, do your essential duties as the government, do the jobs that only government can do, and leave the rest of it alone. And if a business is losing money, then let it go out of business. There's a museum down in Baltimore City that's losing money. And government, politicians, for some reason, particularly on the political left, will advocate for throwing money at things that are failing.
I know. I know.
If a business is failing, if a museum can't support itself, don't give it tax dollars. Save the tax dollars and fill the potholes. Make sure you've got a good police force, and
Right.
Make sure on the federal level that no other country comes and drops bombs on our heads.
Right. It's so simple.
Yeah, it's simple. And when you see like local governments like Baltimore City buying that hotel downtown that loses money every year, it's like
I know.
you guys can't even fill the potholes, can't even pick up the trash, but yet you're going to buy a motel.
I know.
Get your own act together first.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
yeah,
It's
I mean,
sad.
what is the legitimate use of tax dollars? And I think Pimlico, Laurel, hotels, museums. If these places are losing money, why do you want to throw more money at it? Particularly when you want money to throw at Kirwan,
Yeah. I
to
know.
education.
Yeah. Yeah. They've got lofty goals and no way to pay for any of them. You're right. It's getting a little out of hand. And by that I mean it's been out of hand for like 40 years.
Yeah, it's like, look, if anybody can go down to Annapolis and say, give me money because, well, then let me be the first to go down there and say, give TV Free Baltimore money. We educate constituents about how effective it is to contact your legislature. Give me $1 million. I'll spend 1.5 million. I'll lose money, and then you can use that excuse to give me even more money. I mean,
You guys should literally file as a 501c3 and go ask Senator Lamb if he'll put a bond bill in.
oh, he's been in here.
Yeah,
We've
ask him.
interviewed him.
Yeah, he represents that area, I
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's been in here because he was.
Yeah.
We tried to stay away from the people that hold office and give the new voices. But since he was running for the Senate for the first time, we had him in here because incumbents, I think, have a 90% chance on winning.
Yeah, I mean, they're vulnerable in the Democrat districts, though. I mean, it all it takes is the teachers union to, you to lose favor with the teachers union, and you can lose your seat. So,
Yeah, between that and gerrymandering, I mean, the Democrats have this state locked down.
yeah,
Okay.
and certainly the party leadership does.
Yeah.
I think that the members live in fear. I mean, if you talk offline to some of these Democrats, they're real people. They're regular people, and they're not that politically different than many of us are, but they aren't allowed to be different.
Well, being different's one thing. Effectively spending money is another. And I'm going to give you another example. Baltimore City, I don't know if you remember, but the Obama administration gave Baltimore City, I don't know, let's just say $30 million for, I think it was cleaning up after the riots or something. And the
Mhm.
city had to give that money back to the federal government because they didn't have an account in place that could show, okay, you gave us a 30 million, this is what we spent it on.
Right. It
I
just
mean,
went into the
that's,
general fund and disappeared.
yeah, I mean, that's beyond incompetent. You're literally losing money because you wouldn't hire an accountant that kept track of the money. I mean, that's, again, once again, ineffective leadership.
It's endemic in the city. I mean, this week I had to take a vote that was hard for me because it was in my committee and it was kind of sold to us as a delegation bill. And the way it works in Annapolis is if it's coming from one county or municipality's delegation, we sort of have this reciprocity where if you guys want this change for your district, we vote for it, even if we may not think it's a good idea. And that's pretty much how it works. But when I saw this bill came up for a vote, and I think it was HB 490, um, and it was going to allow Baltimore's mayor and the city council to set the pay for the orphans court judges instead of the General Assembly. We set our own pay for in Harford County, for example, for the sheriff, for the county executive, things like that. We have control of that, and we make the decision on our delegation, and then it still has to go through um, the whole chamber, but they vote for basically whatever we choose. So the city delegation in the legislature was giving up their power to set the orphans court judges' pay, and they were giving it up to the mayor and the city council. And I could not, in good conscience, vote for that bill.
Okay,
Um,
my question is whose relative is the orphan court judge?
yeah, I didn't even bother to look into it because I knew I couldn't vote for that kind of bill,
Yeah.
and it ruffled some feathers. Let me tell you,
Well,
it
that
was
goes
not
back to the
pretty.
professional decorum that we were talking about before, about when bills come out of committee favorably, that the whole chamber usually just rubber stamps it unless it's some sort of controversial bill. So I understand the
Yes.
whole idea of professional decorum, but sometimes ideas are too stupid to come under the guidance of professional decorum.
Yeah, and their argument was, oh, this is the orphans court judge. They control, like, estates and trusts. This isn't that big of a deal. And I said, it's incrementalism. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think people that have proven that they are utterly corrupt should be controlling how much a judge makes.
Somebody's relative has to be the judge, or somebody politically connected, and it could become a position that is used to pay off politically. Um,
That was what my fear was, and I warned my colleagues, because we do in our caucus have a list of all of the split votes for each committee. So we know if our peers that are Republican didn't like a bill, and a lot of times the bills that come out of judiciary have split votes even for the Republicans. So some of them will vote yes on it, and it's usually Delegate Cox and I, who vote no, or sometimes it's Delegate Grammar and I if I'm feeling a little libertarian. So, my peers and my colleagues on the caucus, they know if they see my no vote, this is probably a pretty far right conservative vote, and if they're feeling far right and conservative, they'll probably vote with me. So I did warn them, this may be a delegation bill that you're voting against, and it could have blowback for you. And in fact, one of my colleagues, Delegate Fisher from Prince George's County, voted against one of my delegation bills because she was offended that I not vote for HB 490, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
I couldn't go to bed that night having voted for a bill like that.
yeah. Well, you need free thinkers down there. And I will tell you this, outside of this little show that we do together, when I'm going out into other pools, you've got a great reputation. You're starting to get a big fan base, I'm telling you. Everybody that I talk to that knows you loves you. So you may be headed one day to the Senate. Who knows? Maybe governorship.
Oh, Lord, I'm too Republican for the governor's office.
Maybe you can take Larry's place after he retires.
Oh, geez, no. That looks like a very stressful job. He's lost a lot of hair since he's got that job.
But hey,
I would not look good bald.
He's showing some great leadership, and his numbers show it in his approval ratings. And I'm
very proud of him.
Yeah, I think a Republican, if there's a carbon copy of him, could hold on to the governorship.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a very interesting primary for the Democrats because we already know that Peter Franchot is going to run. But remember, this is the party that picked Ben Jealous as their governor candidate last time. So, that is going to be a hard sell. They're going to have to somehow motivate moderate Democrats to actually show up for the primary, which they don't do. It's really only the extremists that tend to show up for the primaries. So I'm waiting to see who else comes out of the woodwork to run in their party. But if he gets nomination, I mean, we're gonna have a hard time recruiting somebody for the Republicans to run for that seat if they're worried they're going to go up against Franchot.
No, we're not, because I already started the group Libertarians for Lauren Aricon for governor. It's already out there. So,
oh my gosh!
So you'll get a double endorsement. But
that's awesome.
Is there anything else you want to touch on this week?
I would just say we have a couple gun bills coming up. I know those are the only thing I tend to want to talk about because they're just such egregious attacks on our rights. Two things, guns and taxes, that are really important to me. So keep your eyes peeled. We did just get great news today from the Senate side. We had moved HB4 on the House side, but the cross-file was Senator Lee's bill. And the Judicial Proceedings Committee did move that bill, but they drastically changed it from what the House version was. And there was quite an entertaining Twitter war between the chair of the JPR committee and Vice Chair Atterbury from my committee about what he had done to her bill. So if you're bored, go look up Senator Will Smith's Twitter page and you can see them go back and forth a bit about how disappointed she was that he didn't pass the bill that she had demanded of him. And he defends himself quite well. So
good for him.
Yeah, we were very pleasantly surprised that he seemed to really be thoughtful the same way that Bobby Zirkin used to be very thoughtful. Does this work? Is this constitutional? And can it be enforced? Mm-hmm. So we were pleasantly surprised that he seemed to really want to fix it. It's still not a bill I would ever vote for, but the fact that he listened to both sides the same way former Senator Zirkin did means a lot.
And for our viewers, after live from Annapolis, we have Maryland Politics, and we have someone from the Patriot Picket on there that goes through all these bills. And in fact, something came across my Facebook feed, and I downloaded it and pulled it up when I was interviewing him. We talked about it, and it had your name all over it. So I guess it came from you. It's like red with guns on it, and had House bill this and Senate bill that. And we went through the whole thing.
Yeah. I posted that so people would know what the bad gun bills were that were coming this session, because we did not have a gun day. Delegate Clippinger decided not to have a gun day this year. So he broke up all the gun bills, and there's pretty much been one or two every week. So on one side, it's terrible for the advocates because it's harder for them to get down there on multiple days. Mm-hmm. But it seems to also be hard for their advocates as well. So it's kind of a catch-22. We don't have 200 moms demand action showing up with zero facts and only emotion. But we're also missing a lot of our big gun guys and girls that come down on gun day. So it's been tough. But so far, there hasn't been a lot of movement on some of these gun bills. And I'm I'm holding my breath, but things could still get bad.
Well, hopefully they won't move. Hopefully they'll just die in committee. And so, is there anything else, or should we end it there for this week?
That's it. I'll see you guys again next week. Thanks again, Charles.
Okay, and if anybody's interested in joining my new group, Libertarians for Governor Lauren Aricon, email me at info@TV3Baltimore. Coming up next, like I said, is Maryland Politics, where we're going to talk about all the gun bills. And we'll see you in that show. Thanks.
This is Sam with Restore Computer Repair in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're having any computer problems whatsoever with your Mac or PC, desktop or laptop, we can fix it at a guaranteed lowest price. We're located at 8701 Harford Road in Parkville, Maryland, 21234. You can reach us at 443-725-5050. That's 443-725-5050. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can reach us at www.restorecomputerrepair.com.
One day through television, the entire world will stream into our living rooms with the velocity of light. Not too far beyond the horizons, international television, to span oceans, capture all the vivid beauty of far lands, bind people of all nations tight together by better understanding, better knowledge, through instantaneous communication of sight and sound.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, TV Free Baltimore viewers, and welcome to the next edition of Maryland Politics. Tonight, it's all about freedom. First Amendment freedom and Second Amendment freedom, and it's my honor to have someone from the Patriot Picket with us tonight, Mr. Paul Brockman. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Charles. Pleasure to be here.
Why don't we start with you explaining to our viewers, if they're unaware of exactly who the Patriot Picket is.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, the Patriot Picket is a First and Second Amendment demonstration group based out of Annapolis, Maryland. We were founded by a very good friend of mine and his brother Jeff and Kevin Holbert about 4 years ago. We decided to not be the traditional good guys who wore suits and ties and went in and testified before bad bills, and we actually get down on the bricks in Annapolis with homemade signs, basically little miniature headlines outlining what's wrong with certain bills and what's right with other bills, and forming an actual picket line down there on the bricks outside the state, the House of Delegates and the Senate buildings. And typically we do that on a Monday night before they go into session in the State House.
Now, the Patriot Picket is involved in a First Amendment lawsuit. Can you explain why and what's going on with that lawsuit?
Yes, well, the very activity that I just described, us being down there on the bricks, right there at College and Avenue, About 2 years ago, earlier this month, a group of us were down there doing exactly that, and the Capitol Police decided that they came up with this new order that we could not be on a public sidewalk where we didn't need a permit, and told us that we had to be on Lawyers Mall where a permit is required to demonstrate like we were doing. So we just told them politely no, and they arrested Jeff Holbert for disobeying a lawful order, and his brother Kevin for videotaping the incident. He actually wasn't holding a sign. He was merely videotaping the ones that were holding a sign.
Wow, that's shocking to me. And which side of the gun question you're on, I think all of us, whether Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian, believe in the right to petition the government for grievances and being able to stand out and hold signs and state your point of view. So it's shocking to me that you guys were, some of you guys were arrested and that you had to take it to federal court. So where's the case? First of all, what's the name of the case and where is it at? Because I think it was filed last year, right?
Yeah, it was actually filed 2 years ago. Not too long, maybe a month or so after the incident happened, but it's actually Jeff and Kevin Holbert versus Pope and Wilson. And Sergeant Pope was the arresting officer, and of course Chief Wilson is the chief of police of the Capitol Police.
And where's the court case at? I mean, is it moving along or is it stalled? I mean,
it's civil cases. Obviously, don't take precedence in the federal courts. Criminal cases do. So they're still in discovery. I know there was depositions taken, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Now, has this changed the behavior of the Annapolis police that arrested you guys?
I don't know if it's changed. I mean, we've been out there since then. I mean, the following week after the arrest on February 12th, we had 400 people out there on the sidewalk. And it's ironic. One of the things that they said was a problem with us being on the public sidewalk was that it was hazardous to traffic. So instead of maybe posting up a cop there to direct traffic, even though it's Monday night in Annapolis, which is pretty dead traffic-wise, we had 400 people there. They had no problems having 5 or 6 uniformed officers directed traffic and making sure everybody was safe. So we've been there, a big presence the week after, and we've been there, weekly during the session afterwards, and with no issues.
It was my understanding that actually wasn't there 2 times that the brothers were arrested? They were arrested one night and then the following day or something, like the police doubled down on the whole situation?
Yeah, well, the second day they weren't arrested. What happened was, of course, the incident was actually filmed by Brian Sears with the Daily Record, and he happened to be just walking across the street because that's what he does. That's his beat, is the State House. He got the whole thing on video. He put it up on his Facebook page, and of course it went crazy. So the mainstream media were down there, and Jeff was actually being interviewed by Channel 9 out of Washington, D.C., when Lieutenant Labs and the chief came over and said they had 2 more tickets for the brothers from the previous night.
And how has the mainstream media stayed on top of this story?
Not exactly. We haven't seen any follow-up since then.
Well, that's why TV Free Baltimore is here, and it blows my mind that there's actually a First Amendment lawsuit going through federal court and the mainstream media is not mentioning it. And I'm sure it's not the only case. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started TV Free Baltimore, so we could hear the rest of the story, as someone used to say. So, and you're involved in another federal lawsuit, right? A bump stock
yes,
litigation.
That's MSI versus Hogan, which is pretty typical when an individual or an entity sues the state. Nothing against Governor Hogan personally, but yes, it's basically based, the takings clause, where bump stocks were perfectly legal, legal to own, legal to buy, sell, trade, up until just a couple of years ago when Maryland outlawed them with no compensation whatsoever. It was basically, you can destroy them, you can take them out of state, or you're going to be a felon.
Okay, and Now, are those the only two lawsuits that the Patriot Picket is involved with?
Yes.
Okay.
Other than a lot of our members are members of MSI,
Right.
and there's other litigation that MSI, like the HQL,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And also, there Wayland versus Handgun Permit Review Board is a challenge to the good and substantial reason to get a carry permit.
And we'll have them coming in shortly, very shortly, to talk about all those cases. So let's get on to some of what's going on in Annapolis, some of the gun bills. I understand that one was voted down in committee that was introduced by the person that's now leading the House of Delegates.
Yeah, that's HB 1261, which was the ban everything just about bill. It wanted to go after H-bars, basically any centerfire rifle that wasn't a traditional hunting rifle or a shotgun. AR pistols, this would have banned, and even it would have banned some traditional semi-automatic pistols that had barrels that were threaded to accept suppressors. So that one is gone. Thank goodness. That was a terrible bill.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a step backwards and let's talk about the ways in which the political left is trying to take away our Second Amendment rights. The first step would be write out bans. How many bills down in Annapolis are actually trying to just ban guns flat out?
Oh, there's. I had to bring a cheat sheet. There's so many this year, and it's ironic that we chose the background of Baltimore City, because looking down here at all these bills that they want to ban or make mandatory. It's funny with liberals, anything that is not banned they want to have mandatory. So there's freedom is this foreign concept to them. So, but it's all these bills that are on this list. None of them would have anything to do to affect the crime rate in Baltimore City, which is just out of control.
Yes, it is out of control. Now, who's actually sponsoring write-out gun bans? Is a lot of the Baltimore City politicians, or is it politicians throughout the state?
Politicians throughout the state. One of the big ones that's on, her name is on here more than once on more than one of these bills, is right out Howard County Delegate Vanessa Atterbury. She represents District 13 in Howard County, and she is just about the biggest gun grabber in the state.
Now, I hate to admit this, but I'm old enough to remember when they banned Saturday night specials down in Baltimore
Yes.
City, and the rhetoric you heard then was, if this just saves one lives and gun violence will go down if we have this done, and it didn't work, did it?
No.
Okay,
No.
so I'm wondering, is any of the conversation taking place saying, look, we've got all these bans already on the books, particularly in Baltimore City, violence is out of control. Why don't we try a different path?
We couldn't agree more. I mean, there are bills up there. Senator Huff and Reedy. I know Deb Ray, back when she was in the House of Delegates, would introduce a bill every year to make good or self-defense a good and substantial reason to get a carry permit, and let the good people in Baltimore, and there's still a lot of them in Baltimore City, who are just scared and tired of all the killings and all the nonsense, and wish to have be able to carry a firearm to defend themselves and be their own first responders.
Yeah, Baltimore City is just out of control. And personally, I think that the politicians on the left are like doctors that misdiagnose a disease, and they're just prescribing aspirin to cure cancer. I mean, how many gun bans are they going to pass before they realize that things like that just don't work?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, back, what's it been now, 7 years ago, when we were the debate over FSA 2013, and that was going to be, the cure-all that stopped all the gun violence. And here we are 7 years later, coming off a record pace in Baltimore City last year. What we've seen is that gun control doesn't work. It is not the answer, and it never will be.
No, and we had the gentleman in here last year that had the permit to carry, and he, just days after the FBI released the report that Baltimore City had the highest rate of robberies in the nation, just days after that, he was going to become the next victim. And as soon as he put his hand on his gun, the guys just left. They just left. And I don't know why politicians, particularly city politicians, don't look at that and say, well, maybe we need to give guns to good guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And the very same incident that you described happens time and time again all across America, where just the mere sight of a good guy with a gun deters a bad guy with a gun from committing acts of violence.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief personal story. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I was a community advocate in Baltimore City for 5.5 years, and I had a drug dealer arrested, and the word went out on the street that I was going to get shot. 2 women and a guy showed up that we didn't know in the neighborhood, and they had stashed an Uzi in a bag of trash because we were having a community cleanup, and I guess their plan was to kind of come up like they're going to help out, grab the Uzi and shoot me. Well, they grabbed the bag out of a trash truck, and before the bag hit the ground, the Uzi fell out, and unbeknownst to them, the guy loading the truck was an off-duty Baltimore City cop, and he just pulled his gun out and his badge, and after that, didn't see him anymore. And we also had a vice president of our organization, although he looked like a cop, was not a cop, he had a permit to carry. So back then, I would take these video cameras and record the drug dealers on the streets, but there was never any violence because the guy to my right behind me, he had the permit to carry, and the guy behind me on the left was an off-duty cop, so we had guns too, and we used to tell the guys, just give us the excuse we need to defend ourselves. And they didn't know what to deal with that, and how to deal with that, and they just left. They got out of Dodge because Dodge was too hot. Good guys had guns.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like I said, that happens over and over and over again, time and time again, all around free America.
Yeah, so I don't know why they think that banning guns is a good idea, but let's move beyond that. Okay, banning guns is the obvious way that they're trying to take our Second Amendment rights away from us. Another one is putting very burdensome expenses in our way of participating in the right to keep and bear arms. Now, is there a lot of legislation down there as far as how you can store your guns and taking classes and basically putting such a financial burden on somebody that people can't afford to buy guns, particularly poor, law-abiding citizen in the city?
Yeah, well, besides the fact that there is a bill. Let me start back. There is a bill introduced by Senator Jack Bailey. That's SB 881, and there's actually a hearing on it in JPR tomorrow, 26th of February at noon. That's repealing the one-shot requirement from the HQL training. And you say, why is that important? Well, number one, it was never in legislation anyway. That was something that the MSP merely inserted into COMAR. And number two, there's no public ranges in the city. So if you're a law-abiding Baltimore City resident and you wish to play by the rules, as onerous as they are, and get your HQL, you have to go travel outside of the city to do your one-shot requirement, to actually fulfill all the requirements of being able to obtain your HQL. So other than being extremely burdensome, and we feel it's not quite overtly racist, but it's definitely, the undertones are there. So it's important that, we don't know if this bill is going to get out of a desk drawer, but we think it's an important bill.
Okay. How about bills as far as like buying a safe to keep your guns in, and the bills that say you have to take so much training each year, and all the things that just take money out of your wallet for you to exercise your Second Amendment freedom? And my thought is, what part of you shall not infringe don't they understand? Because that's infringements on your Second Amendment rights. If you have to come out of your pocket for $1,000 just to buy a safe, or a couple $100 every year for training, and what I'm really getting at is what's the strategy that the political left is trying to adopt to take away our Second Amendment rights? Because obviously with the Second Amendment in the United States Constitution, they have to be creative about this. And when I worked for Senator Green down in Annapolis, he voted for the gun ban, and I was the guy in his office that was responding to letters that were coming in, and all but one of the letters that came into his office was against the gun ban at that time. And he told me, well, just give him a letter saying thank you for what you said, I'll take it into consideration. So meanwhile, he was actually a co-sponsor of the bill, wouldn't say that, wouldn't man up and say, well, I'm going to vote for this bill and co-sponsor it because this is what I believe. He literally just lied to his constituents. But he was also on the phone with the federal Democrats, and the federal guys told him, look, You tried the gun ban down in Maryland, and what we're going to do is we're going to tax bullets like $5,000 a bullet. Of course, they fell on their face with that. So I'm trying to figure out how they're becoming creative on taking our gun rights away. And certainly one of the ways is to put such an expense on exercising that right that we can't afford to do it. So is that one of the strategies down in Annapolis?
Oh, absolutely, it is. It's death by 1,000 cuts. One of the bills, HB 636, cross-filed with Senate Bill 646, excuse me, is the Safe Storage Act. Now, what's the problem? We already have. If you have children in the house under 16, you have to have your firearms locked up. Well, they want to bump that up to 18. It's just one more thing. And also in this bill is a requirement that any weapons that aren't stored in a safe or locked up somewhere, you would have to have some sort of locking mechanism on them. So never mind the fact that a lot of people have, even if they don't have carry permits, have a firearm next to the bed for when something goes bump in the night. Well, if this bill would have passed, or does pass, you would have to have that locked up. So it's just one more way to restrict your freedoms.
Now, I read somewhere that somebody introduced a bill about registering guns and you'd have to pay $1,000 per gun. Is that true?
Yes.
And which bill is that? Do you have that down there?
Yes. That was HB 1261, which was withdrawn.
Oh, that was the one that was
Yes.
withdrawn? Okay.
Yes. That was crazy. Anything that wasn't banned, you had to register. And if it would have passed, it would have gone into effect on October 1st of this year. You would have had 3 months to register all your firearms. And of course, the way the bill was written, a lot of regulated firearms back in the day when we had regulated assault rifles are already registered with the state police. All your pistols and revolvers are registered with the state police.
Now,
so we weren't sure where they were going with this. And then the penalties progressively got higher and higher and higher, up to $1,000.
to me, that just sounds like something one step away from Stalin.
Oh yeah, very.
I mean, who in the hell do these people
yes.
think they are?
Yes. Well, they're anti-liberty. They're anti-freedom. You would think that, especially groups like the Moms Demand Action and Bloomberg's Everytown, and then even locally, the Marylanders to Prevent Handgun Violence. We call them the Marylanders to Prevent Handgun Ownership because that's what they're trying to do ultimately. You think they would get behind some of the bills that would actually do something about the crime rate in Baltimore City and to keep law-abiding people to protect them everywhere. And they're nowhere to be seen on those gun bill days. They show up in force for the safe storage and the long gun transfer bills and that kind of thing. But on the bills that actually make sense, and they certainly don't support Governor Hogan's crime bills.
Yeah, that just, it blows my mind. It's just like they want to ban guns, but if somebody does something bad with a gun, they don't want to punish them. It just doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so we've got write-out confiscation. We've got bills that force you to pay so much money that you may not be able to buy a gun. What other ways, are there any tax bills down there that are trying to tax ammunition or
well, the one that's really especially heinous too is House Bill 1257 and Senate Bill 816, and that's the Firearms Dealers Safe Responsibility Act or something. They have some fancy acronym, and basically what we call it is the Put Gun Shops Out of Business bill. And this bill is, if you're familiar with what happened in Baltimore County with Johnny Olszewski, it's closely modeled on that. It would require gun stores to, and don't get us wrong, we're all for safe gun stores and not having guns stolen or anything like that. However, if this bill would require, like bollards to be put up in front of the stores, video cameras, a security system, which is most gun shops do, except maybe some of the mom and pop. It would have all their employees be background checked every year. And
wait a minute, stop right there. What do you mean employees background checked?
The way the bill is written, they would have every employee of a retailer that sells firearms would have to go through a background check.
Background check for what? To work in a store?
To work in a store. Now, it doesn't differentiate between a small local gun shop that has maybe 1 or 2 employees besides the owner. I mean, this includes Bass Pro Shop, any other. I'm trying to think of some more big retailers that sell guns. I mean, Dick's doesn't anymore. Clyde's, 2A Sales and Jessup are good friends. So in the case of a Bass Pro Shop or a Walmart that still sells shotguns, I guess, I mean, does that mean they're background checking the stock boy, the guy that works on the loading dock, the cashier that works in produce? I mean, where does this go?
What inspired this legislation? This just sounds totally bizarre.
Well, it's bad legislation written by people that don't understand firearms, they don't understand the industry, and they hate freedom. Can't say it enough.
Yeah, but what incident inspired somebody to say, the robbery at a gun store was an inside job by some guy that was in the mob, so we need background checks on anybody that's going to be selling guns at Clyde's Sports Shop? I mean, what happened, or did this just fall out of the air?
Well, what happened was a couple years ago, a gun store in Rockville, some 5 kids stole a car and broke into, just literally rammed the vehicle into the facade of a gun store and made away with 27 guns. The Montgomery County Police were called. The police actually stopped them. The offenders got out. One of them was actually shot and killed on the spot by the Montgomery County Police. Same crew was involved a couple days later and did the same MO. They took a truck and broke it into a gun store off of 29 out here in Howard County. So Senator Wallstreicher introduced this bill, which would basically, instead of protecting gun stores, it would drive them out of business. Because one of the really bad provisions in this bill is the fact that they would need, the way it's written, and I understand they're amending it, but the way it's written was they would need to purchase an insurance policy for $2 million to protect the store because of the bad acts of anybody that bought a gun from them forever. And they had hearings on this already in the Senate, and they had people from the insurance industry up there that said, there's no insurance product out there that we sell that would do this. So, and I'm sure they do all this.
This is exactly what I'm talking about, creative ways to take away our Second Amendment freedoms. If the gun stores cannot buy insurance, because the insurance industry doesn't want to insure them, they can effectively take away our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is sneaky, slimy crap.
Yeah, it's coming through the back door.
I don't know who introduced that bill, but they should be tarred and feathered and
that was Senator
chased down Harford Road.
Yeah.
What a slimy piece of shit.
So another interesting provision in that bill is that every sale would have to be audio and video recorded and then electronically turned over to the state police upon request. So invade your privacy much? Fourth Amendment maybe?
I mean, I don't know why I can't just walk down to Clyde's. Been going there my whole life buying fishing tackle. Why I can't just walk in and buy a handgun tonight? I've never been arrested in my life. Yeah. All this fingerprinting and backgrounds, and now they want the employees to be videotaped and background checked. It's obviously an infringement, complete infringement.
Right. Well, the idea that Senator Wallstreicher put out there was, well, we want to audio and videotape every transaction to have some ammunition to go after straw purchasers. But the reality is, Maryland doesn't prosecute straw purchases now anyway. I mean, the number is pathetically slim. They just don't do it.
This is just stupidity. I mean, the political leadership that we have in this state and in this county, I can't call it anything but idiotic.
Yeah, it's like they could always say, it's not about guns, it's about control. They eventually want to control your life, and free people own guns.
Horrible. Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm shocked at the idea. To me, you know what it sounds like, though? When they say they want to videotape the purchases of these guns and all, it's so that if they ever are able to pass legislation, that they can confiscate guns.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that's the whole reason the other bill, they wanted to register them. Because right now, Maryland doesn't have anything to do, the state doesn't have anything to do with the sales of long guns. So they don't know, other than regulated long guns, regulated assault rifles from the past, they don't know how many H-bar ARs you own. They don't know how many Tavors, how many Mini 14s. This is all handled at the federal level. So if they want to go get them, first they got to find out where they're at, and that's where registration comes into play.
Yeah, registration. I mean, I'm just beside myself about this.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's talk ghost guns.
Ghost guns.
Ghost guns. There's another hearing tomorrow. And once again, we have Delegate Atterbury and DeBayas with HB 910, which would ban what they call ghost guns, which are 3D printed guns, 80% lowers, 80% pistol builds, all because, you know, there's a huge problem in Baltimore City with people getting shot from 3D printed guns. Just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, has anybody in the state of Maryland ever been shot with a ghost gun?
No, they haven't. But and the other thing that this does, besides being just completely, let's ignore the elephant in the room. If a criminal decided to get a 3D printer and make his own ghost gun, even if this law were to pass, he's going to do it because he's a criminal. So all that aside, they're ignoring the long history. Let's talk about 18th and 19th century ghost guns. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, William Schreckengost, was a gunsmith. He made, our family heirloom is what they call a Schreckengost rifle, and you can look them up on Google and the gun auctions sites. But he made very, very fancy rifles inlaid with copper and brass and mother of pearl and this kind of thing. And that's what they did, and they bought and sold. No background checks. Nobody went on a rampage with the Schreckengost rifle, but they were exactly the same arms that the military used, and that's what the Second Amendment is all about. It's not about hunting. It's not about shotguns. It's not about this kind of thing. It's about being able to throw off the chains of a tyrannical government. So the ghost guns of the 18th and 19th century were exactly the same arms that were being made commercially for the military, and that's fast forward to the 21st century. That's what they want to ban right here.
Now, with the work of Maryland Shall Issue and whatever's happening on the federal level, are we getting any relief from the federal government or through the courts on all this tyrannical gun control in Maryland?
Possibly. Back in December, and we were actually at the Supreme Court, outside the Supreme Court, because these big gun bills tend to draw a circus of antis, as you can imagine. The Everytown was there, and the Giffords group and the Brady Bunch and all those were there. So we showed up too, because if you don't show up to these kind of events, then you're ceding all the news time to the antis. So even the mainstream media, if they see two sides of a story, they're going to give us at least half the news time. So that's why we show up to these events. But on the second, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the state of New York was argued before the Supreme Court, and that the Supreme Court still has not issued a verdict. They have until the end of June, when the current session of the court ends. And so we're hoping that gives some relief. We're hoping that the Supreme Court just steps up and knocks down all these silly state infringement laws in one whack, because right now they're actually holding quite a few Second Amendment cases, whether it's the right to carry, AR, this kind of thing. There's a whole bunch of Second Amendment related cases that are on hold until this case is resolved. So hopefully the Supreme Court will give us some relief here soon.
How about Governor Hogan? Is he doing anything to protect our Second Amendment rights?
I would love to say yes, but I can't honestly. The only thing that's happened since Hogan has taken office and he's into his midway of his second term now, is they did away with the one-shot requirement, the shell casing law, which just did nothing. That was primarily a money thing and not necessarily a freedom thing. They did away with the need to submit fingerprints for carry permit renewals, which was kind of silly anyway. Your fingerprints don't change. And then the one thing that he doesn't claim any credit for, so I guess we have to take him at his word, is last summer the Maryland State Police changed their standard operating procedure on issuing restrictions on carry permits. So now business owners, as a routine, get unrestricted permits.
Well, didn't Governor Hogan also veto the bill last year that was going to do away with the handgun review board?
He did, and we congratulated him at the time. We thought that was the right move. We think citizen oversight of the police is important. And even the anti-gunners will tell you that in other situations that civilian oversight of the police is important. But this particular group of people on the Handgun Permit Review Board, a couple groups of people that Governor Hogan picked, were actually free thinkers and exercised independent thought and decided that what they were hearing from the Maryland State Police didn't cut it, and it was their power to have the Maryland State Police instruct the Maryland State Police to issue permits over denials or to remove restrictions, which is what they did a lot. So we don't know if it was a Governor Hogan thing that had the restrictions overlifted, or if they were just tired of dealing with the Handgun Permit Review Board and then subsequently the Office of Administrative Hearings, or what happened. So the ironic thing, though, Charles, is that he vetoed the SB 1000, which would do away with the board, and then his 3 picks that were recess appointments from last year got shot down by the Senate, so he had to, and then the chairman's spot was open, so he had to appoint 4 new members to the board, and he could not have done a worse job. As good as his picks had been up to that point, they were that bad on this last iteration of the board.
And do you think he was maybe doing that to win favor with the political left?
I have no idea. I mean, it doesn't, to us, it doesn't make sense. I'm going to veto this bill and then appoint 4 people who just rubber stamp the Maryland State Police.
Yeah.
It's like, why veto it if that's what you're going to do? We have no idea.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let me bring this this flyer up that somebody sent me, and let's see if there's any thing on here you want to talk about.
Yeah, tomorrow, starting in the upper left-hand corner, 226, the House Judiciary Criminal Law, the Untraceable Firearms. That's the ghost gun bill that we were talking about. HB 1257, the licensed firearm dealers. They're going to have their hearings in front of the House Judiciary tomorrow. They already had hearings in front of the Senate. That's the run gun shops out of business law. 227, which is Thursday, the Education No Funding for Firearms Act. That's another one up there. Need people to testify. And then coming up in March, the 3rd of March is again criminal law, untraceable firearms. That's the ghost gun again. That might be this. Well, that's probably the Senate. That's a Senate hearing. Yes, that's right, because they had it in the House tomorrow. And then on the 4th, lost or stolen regulated firearm reporting, regulated firearms transfers, reporting lost or stolen again in the House. A couple others that are not up on there that are coming up on the 3rd. HB 1502, which is expanding the assumed risk on carry permits to EMTs, firefighters, paramedics, and things like that, which is a good bill. That should be supported. Then also on the 4th of March is HB 1267, and this is Delegate Kathy Shalega's bill about church carry, to be able to allow people to carry in houses of worship, churches and synagogues and temples, even without a carry permit, if the church designates it. So that's a good bill that needs support.
Okay. Okay, we're running out of time here, unfortunately. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Just keep up the pressure on your delegates and senators. We're not sure why bad bills like HB 1261 and Senate Bill 422 were withdrawn. but we know that the pressure certainly doesn't hurt. Keep emailing them. Even handwritten letters really go a long way. Go down and see them. Take a little time off of work, take some PTO, go down and see your legislators, and by all means, you can join us at the Patriot Picket. You can find us on Facebook at The Patriot Picket or patriotpicket.org.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming here tonight, and I hope you'll be out to update us on these bills. And to our viewers, please go down to Annapolis, contact your elected officials. I'm beside myself at the fact that they want to take so much of our money and take our guns. It's something that, for me, it's something out of a novel, what's going on in Annapolis. And it would be one thing if what they're proposing solved problems, but they're not. Like I said before, I'm old enough to remember when they banned Saturday night specials. It didn't stop the violence in the city. Gun bans don't work. Gun buybacks don't work. Okay? And full disclosure, I'm not a gun owner. But for me, I don't think the government has the right to tell me whether or not I can or cannot buy a gun. If I want to get one, I should go get one. So they're taking our freedom, they're taking our liberty, they're taking our wealth, and we have to fight back, at least by making a phone call down to your elected official. So with that, Paul, is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Just keep up the fight. As we saw down in Virginia with the sanctuary counties and everything, if some of these bills pass, I know there's let me give a big shout out to my good friend John Mountjoy, who is organizing a 2A sanctuary movement here in Maryland, starting out in St. Mary's County. He's got a Facebook group up that's got over 6,000 members already, and they're really putting the pressure on. They're really getting close to enacting a 2A sanctuary county here in Maryland. So that's a little bit of good news.
And to our viewers, go on the website, look at the Patriot Picket, join if you want to, do what you can to support them. TV Free Baltimore is definitely 110% behind these guys. They're good, law-abiding people that just want to be free. And with that, this ends this edition of Maryland Politics, and we'll see you next time.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hey there, folks. This is Lenny Rudo from Fish Talk Magazine, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Welcome to TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors.
And so tonight, though, we're going to be discussing his book, Collision of Wills, which is right here, Johnny Unitas, Don Shula, and the Rise of the Modern NFL. And he is Jack Gildan, and I want to say, welcome, Jack.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Nice to meet you.
Same here. I mean, I want to start with, and I'll let you give the standard answer, and then I'll add to it. Your reasons or reasons for writing this book.
Well, I loved the Colts since I was a kid, and everybody had already heard as much as they could take, I guess, of the 58 championship game and sudden death. And what fascinated me was the story of Johnny Unitas and Don Shula, the winningest coach who ever lived and the greatest player in the history of the league. And they were together for 7 years in Baltimore and couldn't win the big one. And I thought, there's a mystery behind that that's worth exploring. And that was something that I had thought about for many, many years and before I decided to write the book.
Okay. Well, I thought another aspect might have been, I think you played football in high school,
football, yeah.
And you wanted to be, or you were a quarterback.
Yeah.
And you tried to pattern yourself after Unitas. So I guess, like every boy that era, he was a hero.
Yeah, I mean, he was a huge hero to me. And not only was he a hero to me, but he was a hero to my father and my father's friends. All the men that I knew worshipped Johnny Unitas when I was a boy. The men that I worshipped Johnny Unitas. And, you know, of course, like any young player, you play a position and you want to be like the best person at that position. And because Johnny Unitas was from Baltimore, he had special appeal for me. And I liked his backstory of being that long shot who nobody wanted, and then he rose up to be the very finest player that ever played in the league. I like that, how he was unwanted but great.
Well, that's part what I want to get into next. The first layer to me is the reasons that you think of for the rivalry between these two men. You've talked about it a little bit in other interviews, but, I have my own thoughts too, so I want to hear what you think of it, because it's more than one.
Yeah, it's more than one reason. That's exactly right. I went into it believing that there might be some silver bullet reason, like a woman. What do men fight about? Women and money.
Right.
Things,
that wasn't it.
Or they drink a lot and then they get into a fight.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, it wasn't really any of those things. It was a control issue. They were two control guys, and they were red hot competitors. So they started off as teammates in the early 50s.
Right.
They're only about 3 years apart. They're almost identical men in so many respects, with one key difference. The one guy became the greatest player in history, and the other guy, Shula, it became apparent that he wasn't really a very good player. And so in practice, because one's a quarterback and one's a defensive back, they're actually squaring off against each other every day in practice. Right. Unitas was a nobody. He had already been cut from the Steelers, and Shula was a pretty good player for a few years. He had gotten a lot of interceptions, and he was the quarterback of the Colts defense, calling the plays. But Raymond Berry and Unitas are lining up against him in practice, and they're exposing his weaknesses, which was primarily a lack of speed. So it became apparent that he was no longer an appropriate player for a league that was becoming more and more athletic. So he gets let go from the team, and then a few weeks later they face him. He gets picked up by Washington. They go down 95 to play the Redskins, and they know that he's a pigeon essentially. Yeah. And Raymond Berry caught 250 yards that day receiving, lining up directly against Shula, and he caught 2 touchdown passes in the game, which the Colts won. So I went to Shula's house. I sat on the sofa. I said, "What happened in that game?" He said, "Well, I vowed before the game," I said, "I knew how good they were, and I vowed that they wouldn't complete any long ones over my head." I said, "Okay, so what happened, Dad?" He said, "Well, they completed quite a few right in front of me." So I guess enough to be 250 yards worth, which would be a lot for any receiver even today.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, so I forgot to mention that to our viewers, but of course, Johnny Unitas has been dead for quite a while, but you were actually able to interview Don Shula.
Yeah, I went to his home.
Yeah.
And I'd met Johnny Unitas 1 or 2 times, and his daughter Jan was a friend of mine for many, many years. Okay. So, and I knew her well, and she was always very generous. She knew I had a deep interest in her father and his career, and just who he was, behind the scenes. And she was always very generous with sharing with me. She's a very, very nice and intelligent woman, and was always very kind to me. And so, she gave me a lot of the information that I was looking for.
Well, you were lucky that way. You already had that friendship.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky. And not only did we have that friendship, but she just happens to be an extremely intelligent and articulate person, and and she had her own analysis of events that were always interesting. She's a very fun person. She has a great sense of humor.
Now with Shula, though, did you take him to be, as honest as he could be, or was it he was slanting things to make himself look good like he did 50 years ago?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that was true either. That was a lot of the criticism of him by the men who knew him, that he was a self-promoter.
Self-promoter.
Yeah.
Right? Where Unitas was seen as self-effacing.
And you know what? I didn't find Shula to be that way personally when I met him. He was very kind to me, was really nice to me, invited me into his home. He immediately accepted my request to be interviewed. He immediately invited me to his house in Miami. He, when I came in, he had a very comfortable situation there. He gave me as much time as I wanted, answered every question. Okay. Now, he was a head coach in the NFL for 33 years. Right. He knew how to handle the press. Of course. So, like, for instance, I asked him straight up, what was the problem between you and Johnny U? And so he said, problem? What problem? We won a hell of a lot of games together. And I said, come on, you know what I'm talking about. And he said, well, yeah. He said, look, let me tell you, honestly, he said, I was very young when I got that job, and I'm not really always proud of the way I handled myself. Oh. I could have handled things a lot better. And he took a lot of the blame on himself. But
oh, that's interesting. Because back then, if they lost a big game, he'd blame Unitas.
He'd blame Unitas, yeah.
Wasn't his coaching.
Well, Alex Hawkins, they're a very funny player on the team, a running back, sometimes a receiver, a kick returner, and his famous quote about it was, when we win as a team. When we lose, it's all Johnny Unitas' fault. And I think that was a dig at Shula, because Shula had become somewhat infamous for blaming Johnny U when they would have their big losses, which he really did after the '64 championship game. The Colts lost 27-0, so they obviously couldn't solve the Browns' defense, but they also, on the Colts' defense didn't play well. They gave up 27 points in the second half. The special teams, they missed field goals. They I think had punting problems. They got beat in every phase of the game, but after the game, the reporters came to Shula. They're like, "What happened?" He said, "Well, we certainly found out about their defense, didn't we?" And the New York Times said he was blaming Johnny Unitas. They came right out and said it.
Well, there you go. I think part of it, and it came to me too, is say, here's the two guys that played. This was a guy who was already a star, he became a star, and by the time he took off coaching, he was a star, but he was a rookie coach. I felt that he had to prove himself, I think maybe to himself, saying, prove himself to Unitas, but also he definitely had to prove himself to Carroll Rosenblum.
Oh, yeah. Carroll Rosenblum was not an easy owner to play for, and the bottom line was you had to win. I think Dan Sullivan, one of the offensive linemen, said to me, he didn't care how you did it. He didn't want to know how you did it. But at the end of that day, you better have more points on the scoreboard than the other guys did. That's all he cared about. He cared about dominance. And for Shula, he came in there and he had to try to be the head coach, and he had to talk to Unitas about his offensive theories and how he wanted to run it. And he said to me, every day I would come into work and I had to face him. I had to face him out on the field. I had to face him in meetings. I had to give him my input. And even I knew I didn't know nearly as much about that offense as he did, but I was the boss. And, he said for Johnny U, it was hard for him to get over our old pecking order where I was this lousy player and he was a superstar.
Exactly.
But now I was the boss, and he could never quite grasp it.
Yeah, I know. That was something I was going to say. I thought, because here's the guy by that time is Mr. Football.
Right.
And he's going to say, here's this guy who I knew wasn't such a great player anyway, and he's now my coach.
Yeah.
But how can he think that he knows more about football than I do?
Well, not only that, but don't forget, Shula was a defensive player.
Right.
And before that, and then after that, before he became the Colts head coach, he was a defensive coordinator of the Lions. Right. So Tom Matty said to me, Shula, here was the problem. Shula saw himself as the head coach, and Unitas saw him as the head coach of the defense, and himself as the head coach of the offense, and that's where the rub was.
Well, I think I was thinking I would get up and see if you can add into it, but I saw similarities and differences between the men. They both had large egos.
Yeah.
But like I said, it would be, as far as criticism goes, Shula had no problem out in public to anybody. He had a short temper, and he would criticize Unitas. Unitas would only criticize Shula really to the other players, not to the press.
Right.
And he took a lot on himself. At least he gave the a semblance of being self-effacing, to the public.
Yeah.
And that he wouldn't trash his coach in public.
Yeah, but it was the exact opposite of private. I mean, he was very funny. He was funny. He was profane, and he was dead on accurate in the way he assessed things. He was unsparing.
Yeah, like when he said, if years later, even because it was forever this rivalry about, if Shula was on fire.
Yeah, I mean that was 30 years after they had last seen each other. It was only like a year or two before Johnny U died. He was visiting with an old friend, an assistant coach on the team, and Shula's name came up, and he said, so the old man says, so I mentioned Shula to him, and he says, if Shula were standing here right now and he was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him to put it out. And that was how he. Right. That's how he described him decades and decades later.
And some of the other, I think, differences is like first in the offense that they said, of course, Johnny Unitas was a passing offense, and Shula liked the running offense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the way Johnny Unitas saw it, he believed that you didn't want to show tendencies. He didn't want people to be able to read what you were going to do ahead of time, and he liked to be deceptive. Like they said, he liked to pass when they thought you were going to run and run when they thought you were going to pass, And Shula would like to win first down. He wanted to run that ball, pound it in there, and get 4 yards or more on that first down and be sure of it, and then have an easier path to that first down. Right. And, and there was a lot of truth in both of their philosophies. I think that I think that the problem is that Shula wanted to call those plays, and and then afterwards he didn't want to take responsibility for the results if they didn't work out. And Unitas didn't want him calling those plays. He felt like he had that feel for the game out there.
Yeah, I think, too, the biggest conflict that I saw in the book was before, under Weeb Eubanks, that Unitas was allowed to call all the plays.
Yeah.
Shula comes in and he says, I'm calling the plays. I think it was Maddie or somebody. He'd have Maddie come in with the plays.
Yeah.
And he says, how come Unitas is never calling what I call?
Yeah, well, this is what he said. This is what Maddie told me. He said, Shula would say to me, go in there, tell John we want to run red right, blah, 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 blah. So, okay, coach. So he would run into the huddle and he'd say, Shoes wants you to run red right, blah, 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 blah. And he said, Unitas would just look at me, he'd stare at me, he'd say, yeah, we're not going to run that play. So he would call whatever he wanted. Then I would run off the field and Shula's, his head is popping off his neck, and he says, what play? John didn't want to run that one, coach. What can I say?
Well, wasn't that a problem in that the players complained that for the plays, Shula would have like these really long names for the plays?
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing that had changed from Eubank to Shula, even though they were using basically Eubank's playbook. But for some reason, and I never quite figured this out, the nomenclature had changed dramatically from Eubank to Shula, and I think also, too, the size of the playbook grew enormously. So I think that some of the old guard players like Unitas and Barry loved Shula. He didn't want to say one negative word against him, but I do think that they felt that he made the game too complex. And what Barry said is that Eubank was a master of simplicity. And you hear about Vince Lombardi being a simple coach. Right. They ran and ran and ran, and they didn't disguise what they did. Well, Eubank wasn't quite like that, but somehow he made his game plan simple. And part of his genius as a coach, Eubank's genius as a coach, was that he prepared his players to play their own game. I think he took pride in the fact that he taught Johnny Unitas how to call his own plays. And then it was Johnny Unitas' game. Charlie Winter, the assistant coach, said we would go over with him what we felt was appropriate in situations during the week, but then on Sunday it was really up to him to call what he thought was right. He knew what we felt was these are the 5 plays we would call on 3rd and long, and these are the 5 we'd call on 3rd and short, whatever. But on Sunday, he had that repertoire there for him, but it was up to him to choose what he wanted.
Well, that was one of the things I was most impressed by, and I want to get a little bit of that in here, is about Eubanks. First, the relationship, we can compare and contrast, the relationship between Eubanks and Unitas, and the relationship between Unitas and Shula. Talk about the relationship between Eubanks and Unitas.
I mean, Eubank was a father figure to Johnny U, and Johnny U's own father died when he was about 5 years old, and then he kind of, he went to Louisville and he played for a coach who appreciated him there, and a pretty good coach. It was a poor program, and but really he tried to go to Notre Dame. He had all these dreams of going to big-time college football, and they never panned out. And then after playing pretty well at Louisville, I think he was injured in his senior season, and there wasn't a lot of interest in him. The Steelers took him in like the 8th round or something like that. And, so a lot of coaches passed him by, and his own father died when he was young. And Eubank did not pass him by. Eubank not only picked him up, but he really believed in him. And he felt familial with him. And in fact, Eubank would go to church with him once in a while, even though he was Protestant and Johnny U was Catholic. And one day they're walking out of church together with Charlie Winter, and Johnny U stopped, and he put his arm on Eubank, and he said, I love you. And I said to Charlie, I said, well, what did Johnny U mean when he said that to him? I said, did he see Weeb as a father figure? And Charlie said to me, Weeb was a father figure to many men, he said. And clearly he was to Unitas.
Well, you can see that difference right there between him and Shula. Shula was not a father figure to his players.
Let me just say, too, like all the photography of Unitas and Eubank, they're facing each other. It's warm. It's collegial. Eubank normally would have an arm on Johnny U's shoulder, and they're kind of looking at one another, conferring with one another. Then you get to the photos of Johnny U and Shula. I mean, Johnny U famously had that brush cut, but you could almost feel those hairs standing on end when Shula was in his presence. He was shoving himself into the huddle to listen into the play calling at practice and things like that, and you could see it was a totally different thing. I would say the one man was a father figure to him, and the other one was
Right.
like a brother he couldn't stand.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is even here the photo on the cover. Look, he's hands on hips while he's talking to the coach.
Well, you could see, right, and on so many of the photos, you could feel that tension. There were very few lighthearted photos between them, almost none where
imagine.
they're smiling or laughing.
And I think another thing, to me, it brings up is Eubanks and, in a sense, having the two eras there in Super Bowl III, he coaches against Shula.
Right.
So you see the two styles of coaching in that game, and, Eubanks, Namath, and the Jets take it to the Colts.
Look, Don Shula could easily be one of the 2 or 3 greatest coaches who ever lived. He was thoroughly outcoached in Super Bowl III, and a lot of the players told me that. And Eubank, I mean, part of what's so interesting is that Namath called all of his own plays in Super Bowl III. So Eubank not only found and developed Unitas and taught him how to be the best play caller in football, he found and tutored and developed Namath and taught him to be the best play caller in football. And that was really, really the difference there, I
You
think.
talked to Joe Namath, didn't you?
I did. I interviewed
Did
Joe
he
Namath
talk
too.
about Eubank?
Yeah, he loved him.
He loved him.
Loved him, yeah. I mean, not only did he love him as his own coach, but he had really idolized Eubank as a child. Growing up in Western Pennsylvania, the Colts were his team because Jim Mutchler, a great Colts tight end, was from Beaver Falls, just like Joe was.
Okay.
And then Johnny Yu was from Western Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh, and that was Joe's hero growing up. So he loved the Colts, believe it or not, even though he would later crush them and destroy them.
Right. Well, I wanted to bring that up because I think, at least today, because memories fade, that Eubank really should be considered one of the great coaches of that transitional period of the NFL.
In my opinion, he's the greatest coach that ever lived.
Really?
Yeah.
More than Lombardi, more than Shula. Because
Lombardi.
Shula says he's the greatest because I said the matchups or the record during that era, he had 1 percentage point better win percentage than Lombardi.
Yeah. Well,
Even though most of the big games, the Packers beat the Colts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no doubt that Lombardi was a great coach, but Lombardi's fame primarily comes from his experience at Green Bay, and he walked into almost an entirely intact team with something like 11 Hall of Famers on the roster.
Right.
Now, they were horrible before he got there, and he did develop them, but they were great talents.
Right.
And they were assembled by a brilliant man named Jack Vanessa, and who died very young. He had a heart problem, but he was a young kid. He had grown up in Chicago as a friend of the Hallis family, and he knew he was brilliant. He was a brilliant evaluator of talent. Whereas when Eubank came to the Colts, they literally had nothing. They were bankrupt both in financially and talent-wise, and the Jets were the absolute worst franchise in all of professional football when he got there. And he built them both into world champions.
Now, I think another thing there was, we don't know, is that Lombardi dies after only coaching 1 year with the Redskins.
Right.
Could he have done something with the Redskins? That would have helped his legacy, I believe.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I think he could have. I mean, he was a fantastic coach. He improved them dramatically when he showed up. And probably had he lived, they probably would have become a first-ranked team.
Yeah.
But I do think in the case of Eubank, in finding and developing those 2 great quarterbacks, he put together teams that were just filled with layers and layers of talent on the field. He taught tons of great assistant coaches and front office people. I mean, think about this. Weeb Eubank, he won 3 world championships. It's a lot. Not only did he win 3, but here are some of the coaches he defeated to win those 3. These were either the head coaches or the assistant coaches he faced in those 3 championship games. Lombardi, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll, Shula, Don McCafferty. You know, but Allie Sherman, I believe, he was offensive coordinator of the Giants in '59. I mean, these are all great coaches who were coaches of the year. I think between them, they had won 14 world championships, and Eubank beat them all three times.
But I think the other part to look at is that a lot of the people who worked under him, assistant coaches, went on to become head coaches of football
And
teams.
good ones.
Wasn't even Tom Landry one of his assistants, I think?
No, Tom Landry was someone he coached against. But you're talking about Eubank?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
some of them
some of his assistants would have included Chuck Knox, Who else? Don McCafferty, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Charlie Winter went on to become a head coach. Yeah, I mean, I can't.
I know, but there's a lot of them. I'm just saying that's also the mark of somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Developing coaches, developing players, developing quarterbacks. And the only thing I can say now, I think when I look at John Harbaugh and the people who have been his assistants in the last 11 years that have gone on to be head coaches of teams too.
I actually think Coach Billick probably produced more good assistant coaches than Coach Harbaugh has.
Yeah, okay.
And probably in the final analysis, I think this may be Coach Harbaugh's last year. I hope not, but it may be. Yeah. And I think that Coach Harbaugh and Coach Billick are going to have very similar legacies. They each won one Super Bowl most likely, and they each had good assistants and good records. I think in the end they were pretty similar coaches.
And I think somehow though wasn't Belichick have something to do with the Colts organization too, or
Belichick was it was after the Shula era.
Yeah,
but I think it was when Ted Marchibroda was the head coach, and Belichick had his first assistant coaching job was with Baltimore with the Colts, and he was from Annapolis.
And now he's considered one of the greatest coaches.
Oh yeah, I mean I think a lot of people consider him to be the greatest coach, but of course his legacy is somewhat tainted by the scandals of the cheating scandals that were attached to him.
How about the Heffenflute of football, right?
Yeah.
But now again, the next phase I want to get into, because we could go all night, but we won't, is NFL then and now, as far as the game and the players. Why don't you talk about what it was like then as compared to now?
Well, it was a brutal game, and I do think in a lot of ways a better game, even though it was more brutal. Mm-hmm. I think that it was authentic, and I mean the players are wearing real jerseys made of real fibers with sewn-on numbers. Mm-hmm. They're playing on real grass, primarily in sunshine, primarily in old ballparks. Mm-hmm. They're playing in the elements. The most memorable games were played in the freezing cold, the snow, the mud, the rain. The players were pushed to limits that no human being should be, but it was part of what was so compelling about the game, especially the quarterbacks. I mean, the one famous game from, I think it was 1962, and the Bears came in. Doug Atkinson ran past Jim Parker, and he got to Unitas and smashed him so hard that his forehead was cut, his nose was split at the bridge, blood was coming out of both nostrils, and his lip was cut. Mm-hmm. The referee came in to remove him from the game. He refused to leave. One of the Colt coaches came in to remove him. He refused to leave. He expelled everybody from his huddle. Parker apologized to him. One of the Colt linemen scooped up a handful of mud and shoved it into his nostrils to stop the bleeding. Parker said, I was sitting there watching the blood streaming from his nose, the blood and the mud from his nose into his mouth, and I was sickened by the sight of it. I almost wanted to vomit right there. I felt terrible. We go in the huddle, and he said, Johnny U looks at me and he says, don't worry about it, baby. We're going to get him next time. So no time's left on the clock. He calls a play to Lenny Moore in the end zone. He goes back. I think the defensive back was a Hall of Famer or near Hall of Famer, R.C. Owens. Mm-hmm. Throws a perfect pass to Lenny. He's not in the corner of the end zone at the front near the goal line. He's at the back near the end line. Somehow Unitas just puts it in there right into his hands in this tiny little postage stamp of real estate, and the clock ticks off. The referee throws his arms in the air. The Colts win the game, and he's got blood all over him. He'll bear the scar of it on the bridge of his nose for the rest of his life. That was Johnny U. That was the game as it was. That was what was so compelling. That's what we all found so compelling.
I mean,
in football.
then he played so many times extremely hurt and beat up.
Right.
And then one of the big changes, of course, is money. And today, let's protect. I mean, the rules change to protect the quarterback, but also say, we have to protect our investment.
Yeah.
I mean, because now they say, we don't want Flacco to play with that hip,
Yeah.
And so, we're letting Lamar, throw the ball.
Well, I mean,
or run the ball, really.
What I said in the book was it's like, in the beginning, the quarterback was the most at-risk man on the field. He had to be the toughest man on the field, literally, because he's sitting there and he's got to wait, and then he throws the ball knowing that he almost for certain he's going to be brutalized on practically every play. Today, the quarterback lives in a gated community and sends his kids to private school out on the field,
Right, exactly.
I mean, that's, he's the most privileged man on the field instead of the most at-risk man on the field.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the only one, and I admire him, even though it's a rival of the Ravens that I admire, is Roethlisberger. because he's another one that allows him to take a lot of beatings. And if he can get back in the game that day, he wants to be back in the game.
I mean, Roethlisberger, he's not a very admirable man.
No.
As we all know,
I'm talking about as a
unfortunately.
player, though.
But as a player, he's extremely admirable, and he is a throwback. I can remember games where the Ravens had broken his nose on the field. I mean, it was obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, it had to be like pushed back into place.
Yeah.
You could see it. And he would just continue playing. And he has that same sort of Rust Belt toughness that guys like Unitas, George Blanda, those really tough guys had.
And I'm saying, with all the sort of glamour boy quarterbacks you have today, I think Roethlisberger kind of gets left out of that discussion as being one of the most elite of the elite quarterbacks.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I would put him in there, and I'm sure you would as well.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, he'd be up there with Brady and with Drew Brees. And, if he's not as good as they are, he's barely a cut beneath them.
Right. And so, I mean, and another thing where you could say, well, Unitas being a throwback is even towards the end of his career, he wore the high tops, high top spikes, like almost boots, really.
Yeah. And well, not only that, but I mean, you could see, one of the pieces of research I did was watching tons and tons of old film. And I mean, more than once, I'd be watching a play where Lenny Moore is running the ball and he's way downfield, or he caught the ball way downfield, and then here comes out of nowhere a blue and white streak bashing into a defender that never expected to see it. It was Unitas blocking for Lenny Moore, but I'm talking like 40 yards downfield, and it wasn't a little, half-hearted thing where he stood in front of the guy. I mean, he's coming in and smacking him as hard as he could. This is very tough.
That's pretty amazing. Now, I think another difference, and I think you mentioned it in the book, and I won't get the quote exactly right, but you said in that era, players paid for basically respect and a paycheck.
Right.
And today now they're playing for the mansions and the trophy wives, the model wives. They'll have wives that are models and stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a whole different concept.
Well, the old guys had pretty good-looking wives too.
I know, but maybe Namath was the first one, since they called him Broadway Joe.
Right.
He kind of ushered into that era.
I think so. I think the quote that you were looking for is Unitas was tutoring one of his successors as quarterback at the Colts, and he asked him, he said, what is it that you're hoping to get out of your pro football career? And the young guy's response was, a Corvette and a German Shepherd.
That's right.
But for Unitas, I mean, look, he was looking to avoid working in a coal mine or working in a steel mill or a construction site.
Doing what his father did.
Yeah, but not only did their fathers do it, but their fathers got their arms chewed off in machines, and they got scalded by 1,000-degree liquids in the steel mills. I mean, it was a brutal life that very often led to early death from black lungs disease, asbestos, scaldings, machinery. And these guys, they were fighting. They wanted to be something more in their lives.
About contact information so that people know where to find this book and also how to find you.
Well, the book
and we want you to look there.
Is available. The book is available at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. All this, it's published by the University of Nebraska Press, and you can get in touch with me at my website, which is jackgildan.com. And you can there's a contact section there, and if you click on that, you can get my email and you can get right in touch with me, and I answer all my email, even the mean ones. So you can write anything you want to me. Send all the weird threats you want.
Great. Okay. Well, we want to thank you for being here.
I enjoyed being here. It was a great interview.
Thank you. It was great having you here.
Thanks. I really liked it.
And we hope to have you back, and maybe we'll get you to do some pieces for us here on the channel.
Anytime you want.
Like an essay kind of a thing, and you're like a commentator on stuff.
I'd be glad
to. On sports, of course.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Same here. And folks, there we go. It's the end of another Books and Authors, and I think this was a great one. The book again, Collision of Wills, Johnny Unitas, Don Shula, and the Rise of the Modern NFL is something that anybody who loves football, loves sports, should read, and also anybody who loves Baltimore should read. So until next time, this is Paul Stefan saying good night.
You're watching Books and Authors on TV Free Baltimore.
torches at thy temple door, Maryland, my Maryland, avenge the patriotic roar that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland. Thou wilt but cower in the dust, Maryland, my Maryland, thy beaming sword shall never rust, Maryland, my Maryland. Remember Carol's sacred trust, remember Howard's warlike trust, and always numbers with the just, Maryland, my Maryland.
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.